Hello, hello, how are we doing? All right, let's try it a second time. How are we doing? All right, good morning and welcome to the Project Healthy Minds World Mental Health Day Festival. What a moving morning it's already been. As I look around this room, I'm reminded of why we built this festival in the first place. To bring people who believe that mental health isn't a side issue, it is the issue of our time together. That past is just prologue and the future is ours to shape. And that when we lead with empathy, we can change lives. Our next guests embody that spirit. Through their pioneering work with the Archwell Foundation, they've championed mental health as a global cause, building programs that support parents, young people, and communities around the world. They've used their voices to spark conversations that too many people were afraid to have, and by sharing their own journeys with openness and courage, they've helped millions of people feel seen, understood, and less alone. They remind us that leadership isn't just about position, it's about purpose. And that purpose, lived out loud, can change the culture around mental health for good. It is an extraordinary honor to welcome to the stage our friends, longtime Project Healthy Minds partners, and the recipients of the Project Healthy Minds 2025 Humanitarians of the Year Award, Prince Harry and Meghan.
How's everybody doing today? Amazing. Well, we are so thrilled to be here to support, of course, what is happening in this space and on this very important day with Project Healthy Minds. So for this next panel, we're going to turn to one of the most urgent questions facing families today. What's happening to childhood? And how and what do we do to allow our children to just be children? 3 years ago, we had met with families whose worlds had been absolutely shattered. Parents who had lost children to social media-driven suicide, others who had lost so many of their children to struggles with depression, anxiety, self-harm, all inflicted by online harms. And you heard some of that in the first panel with Katie, who we met 3 years ago with her mom. And just so proud of you, Katie, if you can hear me backstage, and how far she's come. It's incredible. So in this sit-down that we had a few years ago, what began as individual tragedies became the foundation for the Parents Network. Now, this was a community that grew from a small pilot in November of 2022 to a global support system serving families across 3 countries by August 2024. What we learned in these moments is that these parents, they didn't just need therapy. They needed other parents who understood their very specific grief. And when they came together, they weren't just sharing stories, they were creating a movement, and they did it quite well. Utilizing trauma-informed practices, parents created strong bonds and offered healing support through community. They turned their grief into advocacy, and when they let love fuel their fight for change, we saw tremendous impact. This community power is crucial to protect our children's mental health online. And when we partnered with Girls Inc. for a program called Half the Story to reach young girls in underserved communities, we were addressing everything from body image to online safety. We saw the same thing happen. They weren't just learning about digital wellness. They were creating communities of absolute resilience. So the conversation that you're about to hear will help us better understand the scale of what we're facing, and more importantly, what we can do about it. Because while the research is sobering, the solutions, as we've seen firsthand in the past few years with these very brave and resilient parents, the solutions are within reach, especially when parents, advocates, and communities all come together. So I'm honored to introduce this conversation and this panel with Jonathan Haidt, Katie Couric, and parents from the Parents Network who have lived this reality and are fighting every day to protect other families. Please welcome them to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning. I have to say, Project Healthy Minds, this is clearly a very classy organization, and you can tell because they have these really cool graphics and the shifting colors, and the quality of the people that they hire here to do the introductions. I mean, my God, I am just so honored. So And it's a real pleasure to be here speaking with this group. As we heard in the previous session, this is really all about community. It's the soccer team analogy that Katie gave us. But by acting together, we can win this. And I'm going to show you what we're up against and what we can do to change this. So I find it helpful to start. Let's see if this changes. OK. I think I have to wait for them to put it up on the screen here. Oh, it is up there. OK. But this is not making anything happen. Can I get a different clicker? I'll hold it down. Oh, I have to hold it down for a long time. OK. Yeah. All right, I can adapt. All right. So what I want to try to do is convey to you what is happening to our children, especially as they go through puberty, as their brains are wiring up. That's when they get social media, and the results, I think, are catastrophic. So a metaphor that I like to use is think about the way that trees grow. They grow slowly. Look at the way those roots spread out. You can tell it was structured by the environment, by the tiles. That's where the roots grew. On the right, you see a tree that grew behind a tombstone, and I guess the bark got scraped by, as it blew in the wind, and then it grew around. This is a very good metaphor for the way that neurons grow and for the way that bodies grow. So now I want you to imagine a child always on a phone, always having a phone or an iPad with them, and as they grow, their bones are going to shift shape. It's happening to all of us, but it's much bigger if you're going through puberty and when your bones are really growing. And your eyes are growing, your eyeballs are growing. And it turns out around the world, eyeballs are now getting too long. So the focus is no longer on the retina. And this is believed to be caused by the fact that, OK, I'm holding it down. There we are. Caused by the fact that our kids are spending so much time on screens. So if their bodies are changing, because you can't grow in this artificial environment and come out the right way, it's going to have all kinds of effects. What is happening to our kids, I believe, is that their brains are growing around their phones in very much the way that this tree grew around this tombstone. So what I want to do is just lay out the overview of what I think is going on in my book, The Anxious Generation. I lay it out as a tragedy in 2 acts. First, we lost the play-based childhood between the 1990s and 2010. We stopped letting kids out. I'll come back to that later. But mental health didn't collapse during that period. Mental health collapses in a brief 5-year period, 2010 to 2015. Another way that I can summarize the entire book is by saying that we have overprotected our children in the real world, and we have underprotected them online. I have a whole talk that I give to different audiences where I try to lay out all the different harms. This is not just about mental health. There are so many ways in which this phone-based childhood is interfering with development. So I'll just go through a couple of them today. I've already talked about the physical harms. Let's focus in on the mental harms, because that's, of course, what's bringing us together today to understand that. So what I observed as a college professor, I teach at New York University, is that all of a sudden, in around 2014, 2015, the students were very different, much more anxious, much more fragile. What we saw, so this is data from universities in the United States, what brings people into the counseling center? And the answer is that it's always been anxiety and depression, but as you can see, all of a sudden, the level shoots up in the early 2010s. And all the graphs I'm going to show you are the same. No trend before 2010, and then something terrible happens beginning in the early 2010s. So it's not just self-report. Some critics said, oh, come on, Haidt, this is just, young people are more comfortable talking about it. This is a good thing. But if that was the case, then we wouldn't see the same trends in behavior. But when the CDC tracks why people go into a hospital, and what we see here is the rates for girls and boys. These are the biggest impact, the biggest increases are the 10 to 14-year-old girls, as you'll see here. We enter this period, and those are the rates of hospitalization for self-harm. And again, this is not self-report. And tragically, we see the same thing with suicide. Stable for a number of years before 2010, and then this happens. So something is going terribly wrong, and it began in the early 2010s. Okay. When I discovered that it's not just us, I mean, anyone can come up with a theory for what happened in America in 2010, 2012, 2014. But once we saw the exact same patterns in Canada, the UK, Australia, Scandinavia, across Western Europe, that's when we knew, wait, there's something really big happening here. It's just a little bit of data. Here's similar data from the UK. Exact same thing. Self-harm rates suddenly skyrocket for girls right around 2012, 2013. And we see a similar trend across Europe. This is psychological distress. This is the one study that covers 33 European countries. Same thing. So the entire Western world, we don't have good data from the developing world. We're working on that. But across the Western world, the same thing happened at the same time with a bigger impact on girls. Okay, so why? What could possibly have caused this? The story that I give is a tragedy in 2 acts, and no one has proposed an alternative. There is no other theory out there that can explain why it happened in so many countries at the same time. And so this is the only one. It doesn't prove that this is right, but my critics would, I think, be on stronger ground if they had some alternative explanation for what changed across the world around 2012. To condense it all, think of it like this. Suppose you're born in 1990. You're a millennial. Okay, you begin puberty around 2002 when you're 12, something like that. By the time the iPhone becomes common, which is around 2012, you're done with puberty. You went through puberty with a flip phone or a Nokia or a basic phone. You could call and you could text. It connects you to your friends. It's a positive social technology. But what happens if you're born in the year 2000? So you begin puberty around 2012, plus or minus, which is exactly when, that's the crossover year. In 2010, almost all teens had a flip phone. They didn't have iPhones yet. But 2012 is the crossover year, and by 2015, everyone's got an iPhone, high-speed internet, social media. Instagram became super popular in 2012. And now you spend your puberty years as a product in the attention economy, being shaped and manipulated by the most powerful companies on Earth in order to sell advertisements to the second, third, and fourth most powerful companies on Earth. So keep your eye on puberty. We've got to restore normal human puberty. We can't let this happen to future generations. Childhood has been completely changed. Childhood always had adventure. Any story about childhood is going to have kids outside, usually with bicycles. You know, those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, if you find an extraterrestrial, you and your buddies, you put them in your bicycle bed, you have adventures, you know, like you don't need to go like, oh, you know, mom and dad, we found this extra, what do we do? No, you figure it out yourself. But this is what childhood has become. Very solitary. These technologies do not connect children. They connect them in a shallow way, but at the expense of deep connection. If you're a boy, you can't go over to your friend's house because then you can't play video games. You have to go home alone to play video games with your friends. So that's why I think it's happening. I'll just say the one other gigantic thing, which I think we need to put on the table as in the same equivalent size as the mental health crisis, is the destruction of the human ability to pay attention and the concomitant damage to education, which we all care about. So we're beginning to observe that it looks like phones are interfering with education. As Derek Thompson noted, we have all this great data about educational trends. This is the nation's report card. From the 1970s to 2012, we made steady progress. That's really hard to lift up the average education level of a country, but we did it for like 50 years until 2012. And then this happens, and everyone says, oh my God, look what COVID did. It's COVID, COVID, COVID. Look how it dropped during COVID. Yes, but the drop began after 2012. People thought, okay, if it's COVID, there'll be a recovery. And look, when we look at the NAEP, when we have 2023, 2024, what we see is that if we look at the top students, the students who score highest, yeah, they did drop only during COVID, and they're beginning to recover. But what if we look at the bottom 50%? These are the students who are more distractible. These are not the best students in the class because they already had problems focusing. That's a big reason why they were in the bottom half. For them, the scores started dropping in 2015, and they have not recovered. They're still going down. So we are grossly exaggerating educational inequality. We are condemning half of the population to declining education and functional intelligence. This is a gigantic blow to humanity, and it's happening in other countries too. Test scores are going down around the world. Very briefly, a comment on girls versus boys, because they take different paths through technology and puberty, but they end up in some similar places. I have a whole chapter in The Anxious Generation on why social media harms girls more. And I won't go into it now. You can read those, and you'll all recognize it's so hard to be a girl in middle school, and this makes it even harder. Being on Instagram or TikTok, as we heard. There's been so much coverage. This is an article that was in the Wall Street Journal 4 years ago. Nothing's changed. This same stuff is still happening to millions and millions of girls. Now, I want to just talk briefly about boys, because I didn't know what the boys' story was when I started. The evidence is very clear for girls on social media with depression. That's very clear. That's not so clear for boys. But by the end of the book, we figured out, I think, what's going on. For boys, you have to look at dopamine, at addiction, at behavioral and digital addictions. And our boys are sitting surrounded by fish hooks dropped right in front of them by companies that know exactly how to lure them on and keep them on by giving them variable ratio reinforcement schedules, which is what the video games are designed to do. So it starts with the video games, and then it moves on to porn. And then it moves on, all the chemicals, the vaping and marijuana, all these substances that also act through dopamine. When they get a bit older, it becomes gambling, sports betting, and there are ways to do this, even if you're below 18. And even investing money is gamified, and it's all to addict young men. They're the ones who get addicted to it. So we are devastating the opportunities of our young men, we're devastating their education, and we're bankrupting a lot of them. So they're going to get started in life in their 20s already bankrupt. This is not a recipe for a flourishing future of families and fatherhood and parenthood. And I haven't even begun to mention the effects on young men from being exposed to just so many strange and weird forces by people who want to manipulate them. Many of you saw the movie Adolescence, the Netflix show Adolescence, and I was just so touched then when we saw this photo. I don't know if many of you saw it. This is the young man who murdered Charlie Kirk, and his father is the one who turned him in, and you can just not even imagine the pain of that. Boys and girls are being devastated in different ways by different technologies. They're all ending up with severe obstacles to flourishing adulthood. I have a whole section on the spiritual degradation, which is a little harder to quantify, but actually I'll just show you one slide from this section. So there's a survey, Monitoring the Future, where high school kids are asked a series of questions. How much do you agree with them? And so one is, life often feels meaningless. Do you agree or disagree? And what you see here is that from the 90s, through 2010, 2011, was about 12, 50. It was actually going down a bit. So it was 17% down to 12, 13%. So it was actually getting a little better until we enter this period. And then this happens. It doubles. The percentage of kids who think that their life sometimes feels meaningless or that it's useless. There's a whole bunch of questions like this. There's an existential crisis that consumed young people as soon as they transferred their lives onto social media. So that's my presentation about what has happened. And now here's where it gets much more sunny and positive, because the progress that we've made in the last couple of years in turning this around is unbelievable. I never thought that things would move this quickly. What I did when I was writing the book as a social psychologist, I knew that my goal isn't to say, what's the right age to give your kid a smartphone? My goal was to say, we're all stuck in this. We have to give it because everyone else gives it. So this is a collective action problem. What is the norm that I can put forth that we could actually get? And so I proposed, how about just none of this stuff in middle school? How about we clear the phones out in middle school? Let kids have a flip phone or a basic phone. That's a nice sharp dividing line. How about, social media, it really should be 18. It's an intrinsically adult activity to be talking with strangers and sharing photographs with strangers. But I didn't think we could get 18, so I said, how about 16? Could we get that as a national norm? And it turns out this is going spectacularly well. Families are banding together. They're forming pods, they're forming playborhoods, groups where the kids can go around together. They're delaying smartphones, they're getting landlines. So there's a huge amount of movement driven overwhelmingly by mothers who are getting together, reading the book. Secondly, and this is the biggest single thing we can do now, we've got to recognize that, again, talking with anonymous strangers is an intrinsically adult activity. And we need to get to the point where we recognize, just like giving kids tobacco, alcohol, letting casinos exploit them, let them go into strip clubs. There are a lot of things that we allow adults to do. They're not appropriate for children. And really, the age should be 18, but okay, 16 I think we could actually get. And so we need to do this, and Australia has done it. A lot of countries are going to follow. So this is going to happen around the world, and it may eventually happen here. The biggest success we've had, and by we I mean the whole movement, because I put the book out there, but then it was really 1,000 groups of mothers going to the school, and the teachers. Teachers hate the phones. They can't teach when their kids are on TikTok and porn all day. So the teachers are thrilled to get the phones out of school. But it has to be full day. If you can text your kid, if your kid can text you between classes, guaranteed they're not even focusing as much in class, let alone losing out on all the socialization in between classes. And finally, the last one was more free play. I hope we'll be able to talk about that with Katie in a minute. So just to conclude, there's an enormous movement brewing. I would say it's a global mother's rebellion. It really is happening across the world. And Alexa Arnold, Alexa is right here, my chief of staff, who is now running the movement. Thank you, Alexa. So I hope you'll reach out to her. We're sort of a central hub. We're a small organization, and there are hundreds and hundreds of others. Oh, in fact, I think here I have a slide. So it's incredible what has happened. 47 states have passed some kind of legislation in the last couple of years, whether it was about phone-free schools or more childhood play or something about raising the age of safer design. So the states are acting. Sorry about that. If you're from Wyoming or Kansas, too bad. Move to another state. But we have on our site, there's like 100 groups. Again, mostly started by a small number of mothers that then grows. So on our site, you'll find all kinds of information and links. If your group isn't, this is where some of the groups are. It is a global movement. And so in conclusion, please join us, or look, we're already joined. Let's keep working together. Here are some links. I hope you'll go to the website. Hope you'll subscribe to After Babel, where we put out our research and all kinds of, we have amazing writing by members of Gen Z. So let's keep working together. Thank you. Okay. And I now want to call up my friend, Katie Couric.
Thanks for the walk-on music. Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here. This is something I care deeply about. In fact, I remember when I was at CBS in 2009 or 10, I suggested to a 60 Minutes producer, it's clear these digital devices are fundamentally transforming family dynamics and the way we spend our time. Could we do a story on it for 60 Minutes? They ignored me. But I'm so glad, and I'm so sorry it's reached this point, but so happy it's getting the attention it deserves, and so many people have been galvanized. So much to talk about, but John, first let's talk about, go into a little more about what technology is robbing children of. You talked a lot about what it's doing to their brains and to their bodies. And you mentioned sort of free play, but I think sometimes people don't understand how critical free play is to a child's development. It's not just fresh air and being able to get on your banana seat bike all day like I used to do when I was a kid, but it's really about psychological development and physical development, right?
Right. Play is about brain development. All mammals play. Mammals have large brains. Many mammals are very social. We are ultra-social. To wire up a social brain, you have to have lots and lots of play. When animals are deprived of play in early childhood, they come out much more anxious in adulthood. I think the best way to understand what's been lost is a kind of an exercise by subtraction. So I'd like everybody born before, say, 1990, to go think what your childhood was like. Imagine some of the most exciting things in your childhood. Just have a sense of what it was like to be a kid. when you were in elementary school, middle school, and then into high school. And I want you to imagine, think about all the sunshine that ever came into your eyes, unless you live in the UK, then it's a very small number, but think about all the sunshine, okay? Cut that by 50%. Suppose you got 50% less sunshine. Did you read any books when you were young? Cut that by 50 or 70%. Once you get a phone, you don't read books anymore. Think about all the time you spent with your friends. Think about all the times you laughed with your friends. Cut that by 80%. Suppose you took out 80% of the shared laughter, because an emoji doesn't count as shared laughter. There's something very deep about laughing together, moving together, touching each other, putting your arm around a friend, eating together. All those things, gone. Cut those all by 60, 70, 80%. Did you ever look out the car window on a long drive? Cut that by 90%, because you had an iPad by the time you were 2 to shut you up on the drive. I don't want to blame the parents, but we did it too. It works. Anyway, my point is, think about all the good things in childhood, and now imagine what Gen Z has gone through, and it's all greatly reduced.
Also, John, just sort of navigating, kind of learning social cues, learning how to deal with conflict, right, in real life, and to handle all those situations. Another thing you mentioned, like staring out the car window, we don't really appreciate how important or the role boredom actually serves in our lives. It's something I think about because I'm never bored. I go to a new city, instead of looking around at the city I'm in, I'm reading my damn phone. And so they also say creativity, it happens when you're not distracted. Right. The part of, and you know this better than I do, but the part of your brain that kind of explodes with creative thoughts, one of the reasons you think of new ideas in the shower when you're not distracted, come from kind of daydreaming and being bored, right?
That's right. There's a wonderful book by Christine Rosen, The Extinction of Experience, where she uses the phrase interstitial moments. The interstices, like the little bits between, like when you're waiting for the elevator, you know, nowadays the phone comes out, but it used to be you had 5 seconds, 12, you don't know how long. You're waiting on a line, you're waiting in the grocery store, you're riding in a car. All those times are essential for creativity, because in order to think through something, you have to think hard about it, and then you stop and you do something else. And that's why so many great ideas come in the shower. But my students tell me now that, I forget which iPhone became waterproof 2 or 3 iPhones ago, they can take it in the shower. They can keep, you know, swiping and doing all sorts of things in the shower. That's why I say, imagine losing all of your time where you could think. Stuff is always coming in.
You know, we're gonna, obviously, as we've heard all morning, this is really a parent-led movement. And as we kind of set up for our 2 additional guests, were you surprised at the reaction to your book? I mean, I was so excited. I was talking to John while he was in the process, and he was nice enough to send me some sort of early drafts about these things. But I mean, it absolutely exploded. What is it, 80th week on the New York Times bestseller list? Were you surprised, or did you really know deep inside that that this was going to strike such a chord?
So I knew that it was going to make the bestseller list, because whenever I told anyone I was writing this book, they always said the same thing: "I need it tomorrow. Can you share the manuscript?" So I knew that a lot of parents would buy the book. So I knew it would be successful. It was only near the end, and we'd written like, here's all the things you can do, and all the things legislated, and all these things. Very near the end, I said, you know what, wait, hold on. I can't tell people 50 things to do. I got to pick a small number, and so I put those 4 norms. And what I didn't really realize is just how successful that would be, because, again, especially mothers around the world, they were ready to go. They just didn't know which way. They didn't have a coordination device. So I think it's those 4 norms acted as a coordination device for all of this parental energy. That I did not understand. I did not. And especially the fact that like in Brazil, I didn't even go there. The book wasn't even out in English, but some mothers got a copy in English, got together, started pushing for legislation for phone-free schools, and 10 months after the book came out in English, all phones were gone from schools in Brazil. So this, again, driven by mothers.
Well, as I mentioned, this is a movement that has been led by parents, mostly mothers. I want to give the fathers some credit out there. I know fathers have been involved too, so I just want to give the dads a shout out here. But I think there's no one who truly understands the harms of social media and smartphones better than the two mothers who are going to be joining this conversation. They are Amy Neville and Kirsten Ryan. Please welcome both of them to the stage. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to really have the bulk of our conversation with Amy and Kirsten present because of their personal stories. And Amy, obviously you have Alexander's picture that I know you bring with you when you're talking about what happened. Can you tell us his story and your story?
Yeah, quickly. So this is my precious, brilliant baby boy, Alexander. He lost his life at 14 years old to fentanyl poisoning via Snapchat. Long story short, in my opinion, Snap gave drug dealers access to Alexander, and it's what took his life. Everything happened really fast. I think it was maybe 10 days from his first pill to the day that he died. And when this happened, we thought it was a weird one-off thing that happened in our home. Our local town ran a news story on it, and I was inundated with people contacting me saying, wait, this happened in my family. This happened in my family. And I quickly realized that families all over the United States were waking up and finding their kids dead in their bedrooms from pills purchased off of Snapchat. And that's when we took action. Alex brought me to this work. It's the teens and families that I work with all across the country that keep me in this work. It is incredibly important for me to have these conversations with young people and then go out and tell their parents what it is that they want their parents to hear and what it is that they need to know. Young people are on the front lines of this, as we already heard this morning, and they have the information. They are holding the keys to the answers, and we just need to be asking them for them.
Amy, you've done extraordinary work, and we're going to talk about that in a moment because, it's kind of a cliche, people turning their pain into purpose, but you truly have, and you've been so courageous. Kirsten, we heard from Katie earlier. Kirsten's Katie's mom, and, she obviously suffered some very, very serious health consequences. We heard her story, but as a mom, can you tell us how you witnessed what was happening?
As Amy just said, long story short, and it's very easy because it is an emotional story to get lost in it, so I will try to be succinct. But it was the day after Katie's 13th birthday party where we had to hospitalize her for 16 days for medical stabilization. Her heart rate had dropped into the 20s and her body system was starting to shut down. And about 3 months prior to that, my husband and I had seen some changes in Katie's behavior. And hopefully you saw that earlier if you were here, but Katie's gregarious and she's outgoing, and all of a sudden we just saw this changing. And specifically, we saw the changes on how she viewed food and her eating habits. And so we were lucky enough to find a counselor to work with her. This was right after COVID, and it was very hard to find counselors, so we are grateful that we were one of the families that was able to access care for our daughter. And our counselor came to us and said, where is Katie getting the information about food? And specifically, Katie was asking for things that you would typically find like on a medically supervised weight loss diet. She wasn't asking for Chipotle or Chick-fil-A or whatever a middle school child would typically be eating. And so, we checked her phone. We had already been checking her phone because we felt like we were doing the right things. We checked our text messages, search history, kind of went through like who are Katie's coaches and teachers, and we just really could not identify the source. And then one evening, my dad sent me an article from the Wall Street Journal, and ironically,
is that the Wall Street Journal?
Same exact article that you put up earlier. And I read it, and it talked about this social media platform called TikTok. And specifically, there's a feature on it called the For You page. And Danny, my husband and I, we didn't know about the For You page. And don't forget, this was a couple years ago, and technology moves fast. And so at that time, we were not aware of that. And then it talked about how the For You page actually sends content to the user. And I stress that because this was not content that my daughter was seeking, but rather content that was coming to her on repeat. And so the article further depicts and describes that TikTok was specifically sending content to young females content that was about disordered exercise, unhealthy eating, and body loathing. And for many of these young females, it was changing their beliefs and ultimately changing their actions. We ran downstairs to get Katie's phone because our children have to keep the phone in the kitchen, found the little feature for the For You page, and as I was describing earlier, I didn't look for it. It was flooded. There's something called #WhatIEatInADay, which is a virtual trend. It is on TikTok 16 to 17 billion times. So this was not TikTok just happening to have something sneak into my daughter's feed. This is something that was in complete violation of their community agreements that say they do not tolerate this content. And so that's why we're here today, because we want to be part of the movement and part of the conversation.
And John, how typical is Kirsten and Katie's story in terms of what it says about these companies and the way the devices work? As we heard earlier, it's been very successful to talk maybe less about the content and more about the apparatus that is fueling and directing the content to certain vulnerable kids. Is this a pretty typical story?
Oh yes, I mean, you know, the number of families that have something in it seems to be more like 1 in 3. Like, this is not a rare thing. What we know now about the companies, because you and so many other parents are standing up and are suing them and are in the process of discovery, the most astonishing and horrific stuff comes out. And my team at Anxious Generation, after Babel, we went through all the lawsuits that are put up online, and we took out just their own words, just the quotations from these companies. And I just want to read you a few. So from Snapchat, first we'll do Snapchat. In a meeting notes confirmed that they know, this is their words, quote, "Some bad actors prefer to transact on Snapchat given the ephemerality of communications on our platform. It takes under a minute to use Snapchat to be in a position to purchase illegal and harmful substances." There's a lot in there, and they know that drug dealers prefer it because the evidence goes away. About TikTok, they aim for addiction. The product has in itself baked into it compulsive use. And here's another one, TikTok, and this is their words, TikTok is particularly popular with younger users who are particularly sensitive to reinforcement in the form of social reward and have minimal ability to self-regulate effectively. That's why they want the middle school kids. They're the best customers to addict. They know what they're doing, and they keep doing it. It's not that they want to hurt your child, but they do want to addict your child.
Amy, I know that you are involved in a lawsuit against Snapchat. I'm not sure how much you can talk about that, but what can you tell us?
What I can tell you is that it is a history-making lawsuit. My amazing attorney, Laura Marquez-Garrett's right there. It is her amazing brain that has got us to the point that we are at in this space. We are in active discovery right now. There have been 6 cases that are being worked up for trial. Alexander is one of them. I have been answering discovery questions actually this week as early as yesterday. And so we're moving ahead, and we will be going to trial. And for me, I feel like it's a fight to the death that I'm willing to go there.
A lot of moms like Amy and Kirsten are spending time on Capitol Hill trying to get legislation passed. For people who are not steeped in the subject, can you just give us an update on COSA, what it is, where it stands, and what's going on with it?
Sure. So the Kids Online Safety Act, referred to as COSA, passed in the Senate last July, 91-3. Unheard of bipartisan support for this bill in the Senate. Went over to the House. It totally got gutted. The duty of care, which is so important, was taken out of it, and went nowhere. This year, we've seen it reintroduced in the Senate, but it has literally gone nowhere at this point. And the buzz on the Hill is that it's probably not going anywhere. It's gutted again on the House side in a way that, in my opinion, protects big tech. So we are not going to see this go anywhere. In fact, I'm afraid we're going to be fighting to not pass it. We're going to have to shift position because it's going to benefit big tech, and we cannot settle for anything less than safe by design with these companies. Anything else will not work.
So, Kirsten, what do you think? I mean, if the federal government well, we know what's going on with the federal government. If they're kind of useless in moving this forward, are you just looking at states and schools? Is that where your focus is in terms of implementing real change?
I would say for our family, Katie has had the opportunity to go to DC and tell her story multiple times, as many of these families that are sitting in the front row have. And I think Katie said before, it can be very discouraging, because sometimes the person that's receiving the story doesn't even understand the platform. We're kind of like talking a different language. It's when you're talking to the aides and the staffers, you can see tears in their eyes because they know exactly what we're talking about. But then sometimes when you're talking to the legislators, there's some that just really don't understand it. So at the state level, we are doing things. In Virginia, this past summer, we had the Executive Order 33, I think I got the right number on that, that is no cell from bell to bell. And as a parent, I am super appreciative of that. I want to safeguard my child's time in school for both social and emotional learning, but also just to learn history, and as Katie mentioned earlier, learn stats. And so I think we need to work in every space that we can and get the movement and the wins when we can.
So John, have you given up on all these tech companies? I mean, is it just like hitting your head against a wall? Do they have absolutely zero? I know that they say they're making changes, but it's mostly bullshit, right?
Yeah, that's right. So first, look, the tech industry is huge. There are a lot of different companies. A lot of people are actually very well motivated. So Pinterest has really emerged as a site where they're actually trying to help. And so Pinterest has done great work. Bill Reddy is a superb CEO. So it's possible. But the big three, especially TikTok, Meta, and Snap, and then Google is a more complicated case, but YouTube is a big part of this too. But especially Google, Meta, and Snap are the ones that are where we have most of the lawsuits. They actually are responsive to what's going on. That is, anytime COSA is close to being debated, they jump into action. Meta spent $10 billion to put an AI facility in Louisiana, coincidentally where the House leadership is from. That's where the obstacle is. And then when it came back again, then they introduced these teen accounts that are, yes, mostly bullshit. It turns out they don't work.
They jump into action to fight it.
To fight it, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So there's been no, it's interesting, like they haven't said a thing about me or my book, but they do seem to be working behind the scenes to torpedo COSA, to keep the status quo, and to buy more influence.
Yeah. I want to ask you all about AI. Obviously, it's here. It's being adapted everywhere. It's going to take over our lives, at least that's what most people say, and radically transform every arena of human existence. I don't think I'm overstating it. And so how do you see that impacting what is going on with tech addiction and the harms of technology?
So if we think, I presented to you, here's what happened when we rewired childhood. We changed everything about growing up over the course of 30 years, or especially 5. We're about to do the exact same thing, only 10 times faster. And if we've learned anything, I think it's this. How about we just not experiment on the kids? How about you try it out on the adults, but you don't experiment on the next generation? Because I think it's going to be completely disastrous. And I think a general principle I want to put out there, maybe it'll end up in a little TikTok clip or something, I don't know, is parents, do not buy your child a toy that has an intelligence in it. Do not have them make friends with a teddy bear so that you can never get rid of the teddy bear. Let them develop in the real world and try to keep it out all the way through puberty.
What about, this chatbot problem that we heard earlier? That's obviously really scary. So is there any potential for these companies to keep them away from kids? How do they do it? Is it the parents' responsibility?
Yeah. Well, if AI is everywhere, parents can't keep their kids away from everywhere.
Right. But also, the other question I wanted to ask you, because we don't have that much time, is, screens are here to stay.
Yeah.
AI is here to stay. I think it's unrealistic for us to say, let's go back to the 80s when I got on my bike and ran, rode around my neighborhood all day. So how do we help families and kids and adults, honestly, come up with some kind of balance?
Okay.
Because it's not like we can become, just screen-free
First,
totally.
I just want to question that. That's the way everybody thought when my book came out. Oh, gene is out of the bottle. The technology is here to stay. Well, it turns out, yeah, the technology is here to stay, but that doesn't mean that every child has to have it all day long. So actually, yes, we can return to a time when kids are riding bicycles, and it's happening. This is what's most thrilling to me, is that fourth norm. Parents are getting together and saying, you know what? Yeah, my kid can ride 5 blocks to your kid's house, and then they can go to a park together. So it is happening. We can do it. But I just want to give a little bit of advice to parents out there. I think something that's very helpful. People kind of freak out about screens. What I want you to do is distinguish between stories. Stories are good things, and if your kids wants to watch a long story or a movie on a TV screen that they can't interact with, that's actually good. Don't be afraid of that, having movie night. It's a solitary device up close with a touch screen which gives a stimulus response reinforcement behaviorist feedback loop. That's what trains the kids far more quickly than you ever could train your kids. So keep them away from touch screens, including iPads. Not 100%, but don't let them have one. But don't be afraid of movie night.
I was telling Jonathan backstage, I have an 18-month-old grandson, and my daughter really tries to keep him away from screens. But when he watches Miss Rachel, oh my God, it's like he is transfixed. Yeah. And you see, what do you call it, a virtual pacifier?
Yes, digital pacifier.
Digital pacifier. Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. And I also tell my daughter and her husband, if you're on your phone a lot in his presence, he's going to model that behavior, right? What advice would you all give parents, which I know is probably really difficult?
So I could go on all day for advice and on devices and all of that, but I want to build off of John's call to action earlier. You guys are all here right now, right? I want you to tell at least 10 people something you learned today. I want you to get fired up and join the movement. Read Jonathan's book. Watch the film Can't Look Away. Go upstairs and out in front of the building and view the Lost Screens Memorial. Follow the Alexander Neville Foundation, and you can see things that are going on as we put it out in real time. And then join the Parents Rise activation list. So that way, when we need you, we need to reach that critical mass. That is where the magic is going to happen, and that is all of you out there right now. Join Parents Rise activation list, and we will tap you in, sometimes at a moment's notice, but you will be there when we need you, and I would appreciate that.
Kirsten, what about you? I think about you being in Charlottesville. I went to UVA and I have very strong ties to Charlottesville. Have you been able to assemble a group of concerned parents who are trying to change this for their kids? Or how have you kind of decided to really get involved?
Well, we've had an opportunity to be involved. A lot of our involvement in the Charlottesville area is more with families whose children had suffered from an eating disorder. But as you have the conversations with them, some of the parents don't even realize that they should check the phone and the connection the phone had to the eating disorder. But my advice to parents is, I'm a big believer in you do you. Katie and I talk about that a lot. Our family talks about that. And every family needs to make the choice that's best for them. But there is power in the community. And so if Katie's on her soccer team, or if I'm driving carpool with the girls, or they're having a sleepover, to have the parents in alignment with the guidelines for the cell phone usage is really helpful. And this sounds simple, but when you're sitting in the minivan driving and 5 of the girls are on the cell phone and one's not, it can be very ostracizing to the one,
right.
And in an age of where they are trying to fit in. So as much as I do believe in individual thought and decisions for families, I do believe having some alignment within the friend groups and the teams in the school is really powerful and creates trust that hey, if I'm going to Amy's house, she's going to let us be on our cell phones all night, but Miss Kirsten's not. So I think alignment with the families.
And really
delay.
Yeah.
Their brains are not ready for it.
It's funny, my whole family's coming to my house for Thanksgiving this year, and I've already decided I'm going to lock their phones in the bathroom and see how we do. So Kirsten, Amy, Jonathan, thank you all so much.